What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. So now that the season has come to a close, I think it's time that we discuss the state of the transfer portal in college football today. And no, I don't just mean like looking at who all is in the portal and where I think they will go. I'm talking about the actual structure of the portal itself. And in my opinion, the portal cannot continue going on long term in its current format. There needs to be some sort of regulations and limitations that are going to be set in place to restrict player mobility, at least to some extent, for the sake of the sport as a whole, but also just for the sake of the players themselves. And so let's get into what I mean when I say that. And to begin with, let's talk about what the intention of the transfer portal really was for college football. And the intention was that it was intended to give players increased mobility in the event that they wanted to leave a program for any number of reasons. And as the rule before the portal was structured, they would have to sit out an entire year unless they received a hardship waiver from the NCAA, which were handed out incredibly irresponsibly and inconsistently in a way that I personally found somewhat disgusting, honestly, as it showed what the NCAA's true core values are once again, and we've seen it time and time again with them now. But what I mean by that is that if you were like a highly touted player at a position like quarterback, then you would almost guaranteed get a waiver for just about anything without question, because that was what was going to make the schools and therefore the NCAA more money in the long run. But if you didn't have that sort of clout that a star quarterback would have, then you were at the mercy of a ridiculous and antiquated system, and you don't need to look any further than the Luke Ford situation from a few years ago for evidence on that. I don't want to get into the details of that situation here, but it's an example of why the old transfer system was terrible. It was really poorly done and handled. But I digress. The portal was implemented to allow players to transfer without having to sit out the full year. It improves player mobility, especially now, since especially in today's game in particular, we see coaches on the move all the time, very often, without any repercussions. And so it's really not fair that these players couldn't, especially because any other athlete is allowed to transfer schools, and as long as their credits move over, it's not a big deal. But however, with most things the NCAA does today, it really wasn't a very well thought out idea, despite it being a very good thing in a number of ways. Apparently, there are essentially zero regulations on the portal activity for players, meaning that they can transfer to wherever they want, whenever they want, however many times they want, for whatever reasons they want. There are a lot of problems with this, such as tampering. I mean, technically, you can't recruit a player until they are in the portal, but that doesn't really happen, and we all know that. I mean, the portal allows essentially free transfers, and because of that, tampering is not really considered to be a big deal. And that problem is really escalated when you consider that the portal is open all year long during the actual playing season. So if you're a team like Georgia, for example, back when they had Justin Fields as the backup quarterback, there's a very real possibility and even a real likelihood that your current backup quarterback is actively being recruited by the teams that you're playing week in and week out, even though they're technically not allowed to. And that adds a lot of stress and responsibility onto your coaching staff, but also onto that individual player to deal with, in addition to all of the other things that go into prepping week in, week out at practice, doing game prep, doing all of your academic stuff, everything else that goes into that. And now with NIL, take that example, multiply it by 1,000, because now you have teams essentially talking to players on a different team and either outright saying that they can pay them more in NIL deals than their current school, or at the very least implying that they can. And this has huge locker room impacts to begin with, but it also opens up the door for a constant free agency period in college football, which is essentially what we have now. But even NFL free agency has rules. It's not even really that good of a comparison, because free agency, you have players that enter into contracts for a set agreement of payment over a set number of years, and free agency only happens during a set time period during each season in the off season. In college football right now, there are no contracts for players to commit to, meaning that they can sign with a school for all kinds of NIL deals and then just transfer away from that school whenever they please without any repercussions other than maybe losing those NIL deals. But if they're going to a new school, they're going to get more new ones anyway. And, some people are going to say good for them, go get your money kind of thing. And I can't argue against a player trying to get paid, but I do feel that for the sport as a whole, it is bad, even if it's good for those few individual players that can reap the benefits of it. Teams are essentially renting players now. until a new highest bidder comes along. And I feel that the very fabric of the sport gets to the point where it's at risk. Not to mention any sense of morality or commitment that you want to try to talk about. I don't like to lean into that very much because of the way the coaches handle that. I feel like they should do a lot better job with that too. But it's still, I mean, for some people that is still an issue to address here. And this doesn't just hurt the programs either, though. I'm not going on this whole video just to try to tell you to pity the institution. Oh, poor institution can't afford these NIL deals and they have to deal with all these players transferring. That's not really the only thing that's in play here. The players being able to do this makes the institutions far more cutthroat now. Not only do players have all of the usual stresses that go into being a student athlete, now they have to worry about being recruited over from a transfer at any point. They already have that concern with high school players. Now they have it with transfers at all times because universities are put into a situation where now they never know when a player might leave or take a new NIL deal somewhere else, or they have no idea. And so because of that, they're constantly looking to replace every player on their roster with another player. And looking to land that next guy, and they don't know. They normally you think you have a certain amount of depth at a certain position. Now you never have any idea how much depth you have because you never know when somebody will just find a new NIL deal and leave your program. And so you constantly have to be doing the same thing. You can't be loyal to your players as much if you were a program that was doing that because you're constantly having to worry about your players leaving you, and so you have to keep up with the competition, and so you have to constantly bring in new guys above them. And that's a huge amount of stress and issues you can add to the players there. And not to mention the impact that this has on high school athletes, particularly of around the 3-star variety. They already have had more than enough to worry about with their 4 and 5-star than their 4 and 5-star counterparts do. The 4 and 5-star guys are going to get signed somewhere. They're going to get all the chances that they need to succeed, and they're going to get NIL deals for the most part. 3-star guys, not so much. It's kind of like being a late-round draft pick in the NFL. You don't get the same opportunities that those bigger recruits do. Now, not only do the 3-star guys have to deal with that coming out of high school, they constantly have to consider that at any point they can be replaced both through high school recruiting and through the portal. And that doesn't even just mean once they get on campus. In the same recruiting cycle, you can commit to a program under a scholarship and then have that scholarship revoked at the last minute, in the 11th hour because they found a transfer that they need to land, or one of their guys at a different position transferred out, so now they need to change their dynamics of how they're going to build their roster. It adds immense stress to the high school players there as well. Which brings me to my next issue in the portal, and that is that it will honestly harm more players than it's going to help. Forget about all the worries about being over-recruited. That's just kind of life in some sense. But for a large number of players that are currently in the portal, dare I say even a majority of them, they won't find a better place to land, if any place to land. The top-level guys will always find a home, but what about, the guard from in Eastern Michigan or something who was told that the portal is a way for him to go start at a Power 5 and then come to find out those coaches are way too busy trying to keep up with who they have on their current roster, who they're bringing in with high school recruits, who else they're going to hit in the portal, to even really review film of this guy, sift through him and find him and offer him a spot. And even if he does get offered a spot, is there any amount of guarantee that he'll actually ever get to play there? No, there really isn't any. And it's not just onesie, twosie. There's thousands of players in the portal right now. Coaches don't have the time and the resources to go through all of the high school film for this class, all of the high school film for next class, and they're working 3-4 classes ahead. Then also all of their current team's film, work on all of the practice that they have to do with that, all of the other obligations that the coaches have, and look at the top guys in the portal, the guys at their position that they need in the portal, and sift through even the lower level, and I say lower level loosely because I'm not trying to insult any of these guys, but there's clearly a hierarchy to, the value placed on these transfer portal players. And so these middling to lower level players, they might get picked up and find a great situation, but there is no guarantee of that. And it puts them in a huge risky situation, and nobody talks about the risk. Nobody talks about all the negative aspects that come with putting your name into the portal. I mean, hundreds of these players are not going to find better situations than they left, despite what everyone keeps telling them about how the portal is just some magical path to greener grass and greener pastures. That's not always true. If you're a middle to low level talent in the portal, there's almost no way that you can consistently find an upgrade in your situation and in your program, because there are just way too many players to go around to really make sure nobody slips through the cracks. And a lot of them, not just onesie twosie, a lot of them are going to slip through the cracks, going to be left with nowhere to go, or more likely they'll have somewhere to go, but it's going to be a worse team and a worse situation than before. Even if they go to a technically better program, they're going to get less playing time or something along those lines, and that's bad. It's bad, despite what the supporters of this wide open, no regulation transfer portal are going to say. There's a lot of negatives for the players that come into this as well. And like I said earlier, on the one hand, I feel like, to some extent, that's just life. Sometimes you have to let people fail and to figure out, their own lives and just, let them fail on their own instead of trying to get involved. But on the other hand, I feel like we're doing a major disservice to a lot of these kids by either misinforming them or just not informing them at all on the dangers of entering the transfer portal, because there is never a guarantee that the school you left will take you back if you don't find something better, especially if you are a middling level talent. A lot of them will be like, well, you didn't want to be here when we wanted you. Now you found out nobody else is going to give you an offer, so now you want to come crawling back. No, we've already replaced you, kind of thing. And I feel like there's a major disservice being done there. There are a lot of other issues with the portal as well, but to me, those two are by far the biggest ones, with the NIL connection being the main one of all. I mean, we literally have an all-out bidding war in college football right now for players who have no obligations to stay. Look at Dillon Gabriel, for example. This guy leaves UCF, commits to UCLA, plans to enroll, has signed up for classes, likely has NIL deals in tow with all of that, and then the day that classes start, he packs up, heads to Oklahoma, and it's largely believed that programs were throwing literally millions of dollars at Caleb Williams when he hits the portal. And regardless of the issues that some people have with a person of that age, being that young, getting that much money just thrown at them and all the things that come with that, I just feel like that kind of situation can really kill off a lot of the middling to smaller level college football programs. The portal isn't making these smaller programs better. It's making the programs with the most money and the most resources better, which conveniently is exactly what the coaches at those elite programs said was going to happen, but nobody seemed to listen to them. And now I'm not saying that we need to abolish the portal by any means, because it does do a lot of good things, and I do support players' abilities to move teams and transfer just like any other student or coach would, but I am proposing a few regulations. The first being a limitation on the time frame that the portal is open. The portal should not be open during the regular season or during bowl season and the playoffs. The chances for tampering are much higher during these times. It distracts both the players and the coaches from actually preparing and playing the sport itself. We already have a dead period in high school recruiting already, so this isn't something that's unheard of. The NFL does the same thing with free agency, and I would like to say that after the national championship is played, then it should remain open until a few weeks before fall camp start. This means that if you decide to transfer after fall camp, you have to wait until the next season to do so. And that would give players the chance to, at the end of the season, transfer. After February signing day, they could transfer. Before spring practice, they could transfer. After spring practice, they could transfer. And right before fall camp, they could transfer. That's plenty of time for most players to figure out if they really need to transfer or not, and I feel like it's more than fair. The next limitation I would propose is that you can only sign or enroll with a team through the portal one time that year. You must go there for that season. You can't sign with one team and then 2 weeks later decide to go somewhere else. This can be loopholed to some extent by just verbally committing and not actually signing and then flipping that, but that already exists in high school and it works out just fine. The third limitation I would propose is simply just put much stricter rules against recruiting players who aren't in the portal. Crack down on tampering, please, because I know this is going to be hard to implement, but without it, the entire purpose of limiting the time frame that the portal is open is completely defeated, because if you don't enforce the tampering rules, then there's no point in having the portal closed, really, because they're still going to be, recruiting them in like they were in the portal to begin with, even if it's closed. It's going to take a lot of resources to pull that off, But, I mean, we need that. I feel like we really need that for the future of college football. We need more resources committed to tampering and recruiting in all forms, in my opinion. The last thing that I would propose is that the schools must be required to fully and properly educate players on the benefits and the dangers of entering the portal. They can use former players who have used the portal and it not worked out, or former players who have used the portal and it did work out. You just see both sides of it. They can just have coaches speak from their experience within the portal, anything like that. But there needs to be much better education as a whole for players before they make the decision to enter the portal or not. And in a perfect world, it would be really nice to treat it in a similar way to entering the NFL draft, where players are given multiple projections from different scouts and different NFL insiders on where they are valued in the NFL draft to make the best decision on if they should leave or not. I'm not sure of the exact way to implement that in college football, which is why I say it would be a perfect world. But if it was possible, at least to some extent, I feel like it would be a great way to help show the players the true likelihood that they have as an individual of finding a better landing spot than what they're leaving, instead of just this blanket idea that the portal is great for everybody and nobody's going to get hurt by it. Anyway, that'll do it for this video. Let me know down in the comment section what you guys think about the current state of the transfer portal and if we need regulations and limits on it, and if so, what regulations would you guys propose? Also, tell me what you think about my proposals, what you would change for your own set of proposals, like I said. Also, if you've made it this far in the video, go ahead and leave a like on the video because it helps out the channel tremendously. Subscribe to the channel as well for more college football content like this in the future. I will continue to put out content relating to college football as regularly as my schedule allows going forward. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.